Okay, so welcome. Before we get into the world of tempering, I really want to discuss what is chocolate. I find understanding this before we even get to understanding temper, there's a lot of science here. I just want to explain what chocolate is. Here I sort of have all the stages and all the forms that chocolate can come in. So of course, it's coming from a plant. This is a tree, cacao theobromine. So this is a tropical fruit grown along the equator, and it is, right here I have an example of a dried cocoa pod, but it is a tropical fruit. So whenever you're thinking of chocolate, I want you to think of this tropical fruit. It has a very fruity flavored meat that's sort of a combination of mango, pineapple, and passion fruit. Very, very tropical, delicious. You can purchase cacao pulp frozen from some ethnic grocery stores. I found it in Little Portugal in a lot of the freezer sections. So get some, give it a taste. You'll be really, really shocked at its flavor. But often we don't get to try the pulp because the pulp is used in the process of making chocolate. So below here I sort of have all my stages of different forms of chocolate. So here I have the bean that we can purchase here. Now you might be noticing beans now available at Bulk Barn. That is becoming more widely accessible. So this is a very, very sort of new world we're in the world of chocolate, where people are learning how to make their own chocolate from bean to bar at home. So sourcing beans is not that hard. When you purchase the beans, they will come with an external shell on them, this like husk. I want you to think of these beans kind of like a peanut, so that I have my sort of peanut skins and my bean in the center. In the processing of chocolate, the beans are often, or the hulls are often used for animal feed, fertilizer, or even some people use it as a tea leaf, and you can get a lovely flavor from it. So there's a lot of use here. But there's a lot done to our bean from the stages of fruit to when we purchase it. Beans from the pod will go through a process of fermentation and drying and roasting. So what is actually done with the meat of the fruit is they take the meat along with the beans and put them into large vats in the sun so that that sugar in the fruit can help the fermentation of the bean. Once a couple weeks have passed, or the right level of fermentation for the farmer has been reached, then they are laid out into the sun to dry, giving you roughly the same look as these guys. Often when you are purchasing raw cacao, it has been toasted slightly just to kill off bacteria, but it is suggested to re-toast it so that you are killing a lot of the bacteria. Another form that you can buy it in, not just the bean, is nibs. And all that is the center bean minus the husk broken into little nibs, or to little pieces. So this is hulled, roasted, fermented, and broken pieces of cacao. Now this is the closest you can get to making your own bar without going through all the process of toasting and milling. What we do with the nibs is then we can grind it down. Now you can grind it down into an ingredient called cocoa mass. And cocoa mass is, if you think about it, like peanut butter. I'm still in my peanut nut sort of mental state. Once I grind it down and put it through a mélangeur, which is a machine that's grinding really, really fine, I will get cocoa mass. Now cocoa mass, not unlike peanut butter, because it has cocoa butter in it, is very, very, very hard. There is no sugar, no dairies involved in this. This is just pure ground cacao tempered and put back together. When I separate these ingredients, or when I mill it more, I can remove my two elements from my cocoa mass, which is cocoa butter, which comes in excess from the bean. So there's usually byproduct of cocoa butter in the cocoa manufacturing world, and this is why it's often used in the world of cosmetics. And then the dried powder left behind from the removal of the fat, added with cornstarch, often cocoa powder. Different levels of cornstarch, different levels of sugar or milk products make them different levels of cacao, of cocoa, and how to use it. The most amazing thing in the world of chocolate is the cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is the reason why chocolate can be polymorphic, which means it can be a liquid and a solid. It has many different states, all because of the way that cocoa butter functions. When we get into why tempering happens, this will make sense. But this is the magic in chocolate, is the cocoa butter. When it comes to after we've created our cocoa mass, we can move into the world of other flavors. Now, there are 5 types of chocolate on the market right now. One of them is actually brand new, so this is a lovely time to be in the world of chocolate. Now, on my beans over here, you can see that I have these white beans. These are actual albino beans. These are called Jaguar beans, and you can buy them from Choco Soul, and there's a couple different locations. And this is closer to the original strain of cacao versus the sort of crossbred cacao that we have now, because cacao is actually originally was albino, and through the use of beans being currency for some Mayan and Aztec civilizations, these guys are traveling all over the world and dropping out of pockets. So cross-pollination has led to the loss of a lot of the albino original type of bean. So this is quite amazing that you can get your hands on it now. It is very rare and very expensive. But because I'm getting more versatile beans, we are getting into the discovery of new types of chocolate, such as ruby cacao. So ruby is coming from a different strain of the bean that is living in between the land of the albino and the mixed breed that we are more common with today. So this is put out by Cocoa Berry or Calabo, and as you can see, it has a slight pink tinge to it. It has a fruity and sour flavor. I like to consider it slightly like yogurt covered raisins, that kind of sourness of that yogurt coating. Ruby is fabulous, but it does not retain its natural color when being used in ganaches and things, because its color is not stabilized. This is not added food color. This is through the fermentation process. Another form of chocolate we have is white chocolate. I have 2 different forms of white chocolate. Of course, white chocolate itself, and then toasted white chocolate, which is caramelized white chocolate. You can Google how to make this. It's really, really simple by using simple white chocolate. White chocolate, both caramel or gold or blonde and white, are not considered chocolate because they do not contain any cocoa mass or the cocoa liqueur, which is defining as chocolate. The only ingredient from the bean that it carries is cocoa butter, so it can be tempered. But in the world of chocolate, white and caramel are not considered true chocolates. We do get to our true chocolates in the world of dark and milk, and the only variation is how much milk powder, milk ingredients, or sugar ingredients I am using. Also along with different levels of cocoa butter or different levels of cocoa mass to create different flavor combinations. The greatest bit of information I can tell you about chocolate is if it wasn't for the mosquito, we wouldn't have chocolate, because mosquito is the only pollinator of the cacao tiny orchid plant that grows throughout the entire tree. So next time you are being swarmed, buy yourself a chocolate bar and say it's all worth it. I hope that explains a little bit before we get into the world of tempering. Okay, so welcome to tempering chocolate. I suggest we go over this video a couple different times. I suggest you watch it a few times. I know it's going to be long. I want to do this in real time so everybody can understand it. This is by far the hardest thing in the entire course, but the only way to get better at it is to repeat, repeat, repeat. So let's go over what we're going to do. I'm working with 900 grams of my Lindt Surfin. I have the bag here so everybody can see. Lindt bags available at pretty much every Lindt outlet store or every Lindt store. And I'm using, they all are the same bag, but they're all gonna have different types of chocolate stickers on the back. So Surfin is their dark couverture. And then there's also this lovely little diagram on the back that you'll want to cut out and keep in your notes for reference, because this is Lindt's tempering guideline, and every brand of chocolate is going to have a little bit of a different guideline, so do find it on their website or on the packaging itself. So you want to reserve that. Don't chuck that one for yourself. First things first, I'm going to get my chocolate melting while I'm explaining all that I'm doing. So I have 900 grams measured into this bowl. When we are doing this method, the method we're going to be using is called seed tempering, and I find that this is the most successful with the least amount of equipment, so that most people can pull this off at home. I like seed tempering over some boiling water. A lot of different methods are used for seed tempering, so like a marble, or you can do a microwave method, but to me, I like this method. I find that most of my students have great success with it. So what I'm going to do is reserve about 1/10. So I'm looking for, if I've got 900 grams, around 75 grams of seeds. So this is unmelted chocolate pastels, so just the actual little pieces themselves. The remaining chocolate I'm going to put over top of simmering water. This water is much too high for what I want to do. So I bring it to this simmer point, turn my settings to my lowest possible setting so that I've just got a slight boogie, and then I can put my chocolate on top. The number one thing you want to remember when we're working in the water bain-marie method with chocolate is water is chocolate's number one enemy. I'll explain why. But because water, if it gets in here, will wreck all this chocolate. So we want to have a low simmer so that does not happen. And let's explain what we're doing. So I have this little diagram in front of me because chocolate is a very, very complicated structure. And that is all due to the fact that inside chocolate there is cocoa butter. So cocoa butter is the only fat that can crystallize. So it is an anomaly that it exists. The problem we're going to face is that it's so good at doing this crystallization that it will grab any crystal it possibly can. But in order to get a proper temper, we only need one specific type of crystal, which is called the beta crystal. What we're looking for in temper is qualities that it displays. So if you have ever just melted a chocolate bar and then put it in the fridge, you're going to notice that it comes out looking really ugly. White streaks, sometimes it crumbles, sometimes you'll see patches all over it, or a haze over top of the whole chocolate. This is all due to the crystal forms taking place in it. So what we need to do is go through a process to create the one crystal we want. Now, conveniently, the one crystal we want is the tightest, and if you use your little Lindt pieces, is the tightest crystalline structure that can be created in the matrix of this fat, meaning there isn't going to be much space within the crystals. So the tightest, roundest form of a crystal is going to be the beta crystal. Other crystals that can happen, we're going to be larger, less agitation, sort of like snowflakes again, where if we don't agitate, the crystals are going to want to grow in the easiest format possible, which are usually larger, more inconsistent structures. But we're looking for a very specific, even structure, this beta crystal, so that my chocolate can interlock and produce a good temper in appearance and in texture and in performance. If I don't do this and I have larger crystals and they have sort of feathery edges to them, I'm going to see different characteristics displayed on top of my chocolate, such as streaks, so that sort of lines throughout it, bloom, which are those spots all through it, or haze, which is that gray appearance. Haze can often happen to chocolate while it's still in temper, because if that surface area melts, the surface melts and then resets, those crystals will not go through the process that we're going to put them all through. So the basic concept is we want the crystal that is going to be the hardest to achieve. And the way we achieve that is through specific temperature windows and agitation. So if I do these together in unison, I will have a perfect temper. If I miss any of these number windows or prevent the proper agitation, I will start displaying these flakier, larger crystals once again. So the idea is we need to go through this process in order to create a nice tight temper. Now a temper, if done correctly, will display shine, even texture. It will have a snap, so when I break the piece, I can hear a little snap sound. Other things it'll do is it will contract when it's setting. So this is how we mold things, because it will naturally release itself from the mold. And then finally, it has a lower melting point, so that if I hold it in my hand, it's not going to melt right away. If I do not adhere to these temperatures or the agitation that I need, then I will fall out of temper or not get a smooth temper, and then these qualities will not be displayed. So it will often not set, not contract, not release, and have a not so beautiful appearance. The first thing that I want to point out is the importance of the tool. I prefer a silicone spatula that is one part. Water is the #1 enemy for chocolate, because I have sugars within my chocolate, and water can be absorbed in the sugar, but not the fat that is majority of the chocolate. So a lot like your oil vinegar situation, if you get water in your chocolate, you'll have splitting. So it's not going to look good. It's going to actually seize on you and not be pretty. So having a spatula that does not have areas for water to get in or stay, so those removable head spatulas, I don't like them. I like a solid one-piece spatula. These ones are from PC, I believe. I just want to move my chocolate around while it's melting. So that is a very important tool, but the #1 tool you are going to need is one of these guys. This is a laser thermometer. Now they shouldn't cost over $40. You can use your probe, but I will tell you that this is a night and day difference in your temper. It makes your life a lot easier. If you see, it's a bit of a trigger, and if you can read my numbers there, they're going to appear and change based what's in front of it. Remember, these thermometers are a spectrum, so you want to be really, really close to your product. So when I'm taking my temperature, I want to be really, really close. I want to agitate my product in front of it so that I know that I'm getting a good reading. Okay, so I don't want this chocolate to get too hot while I'm explaining things, so I'm going to take that off the heat, and I'll explain all what I'm doing. But let's go over this chart first. So we have technically 3 windows. On the back of your bag, you're going to see 3 windows. Each window has to be sort of achieved in a proper way. So first off, we're going to melt our chocolate. I reserve some that contains beta crystals. Whenever you purchase chocolate, it comes in temper. So these pieces of chocolate already contain the crystal structure that I'm looking for, the beta crystals. So reserving them is my seeds that I'm going to plant in my blank canvas of my melted chocolate. Your windows. So you're going to be given by your supplier work windows or temperature windows to go within. So 45 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius creates a blank canvas of crystals, meaning every single crystal, good or bad, melts. So I have a blank canvas. Whenever I'm looking at these windows and I'm using a laser thermometer, I have decimal places here. I always suggest aiming for dead center of your temperature window. So I'm not going to 45, I'm not going to 50, I'm going to 47.5 on the nose. Now the reason I'm doing that is because sometimes these can be off a degree or two, especially if they're really old batteries or not good quality batteries, or if you're not holding it properly. So aiming for dead center ensures that you are most likely within that window. So we aim for the dead center number. So we're going to melt our chocolate down. We're going to melt our chocolate down to 47.5. Now when I'm looking for 47.5, you can see I'm about 40 here. I want to be able to see the number present on my thermometer for the count of 10. Now this is to ensure that you have reached this number and you didn't just accidentally reach the side of the bowl or scoop some away and reach the bottom. I want to guarantee that the entirety of the mass has reached 47.5 for the count of 10. Now you might see it jump up and down. That's okay. Count to 10 when you see the numbers. So if I see 47.5, I go 1, 2, 3. Oh, it jumps. I wait. Comes back. 4, 5, 6. Wait. 7, 8, 9. You don't have to count consecutively, but the idea is I need to see the number on the screen for a decent amount of time so that I feel it in my gut that I have passed this window, and therefore I can move to the next window. The best thing to do is trust yourself. Don't second guess yourself. If you second guess yourself, you tweak recipes, you make mistakes. If you are confident, you have more of a chance for success. I also have a little knife set by because I want to show you the stages of temper as we go through them. So I draw streams against a piece of metal. So I'm just going to be using a knife here to show that. So I'm at 45.6. You see how it's jumping around? So I give it a stir. Now I'm at 48, 47. So I'm in that window when I see my numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see I can climb up while I'm doing that. So if you need to take it off the heat to count to your 10, that's perfectly fine. Now I have a rag here that has just some cool water on it because now I'm going to be dropping down in temperature. Now this is where we start the seeding method. So before I do that, I'm going to take one stream of my chocolate and just draw a line on my knife, set it aside so you can see what happens during this whole process. So we're just going to push this forward a bit. Now, when it comes to seeding, what I want to do is, this is the agitation portion of tempering. I want to make sure that the entire mass is down in the bottom of the bowl. If you notice, you've got a little bit, I know this is like OCD here, but what I'm saying is if you prevent messes from happening when they just first start to show up, then you will have no problems. I don't want to agitate here. I'm not trying to incorporate air. I want to slowly manipulate it. I like to consider this lapping waves. And there is a very specific motion I'm doing here. I'm actually going to move this out of the way so you can see my whole hand better. I'm doing, if you can see, my finger is elongated with the tool. So now the tool has become an extension of my arm. So all I'm doing is rotating my wrists while moving side to side. Then I also rotate my bowl. So I have two motions at the same time. It's a little pat your head, rub your belly, okay? So that's the motion. And I do this for about 5 laps of my bowl, and then I go with my spatula, pressing against the sides of the bowl, and bring the outside down to the inside, and then continue. Now that is the motion. So now that we've mastered the motion, we are going to start the seeding method. And that is by taking my chocolate, adding 4 or 5 pastels at a time. We want less is more here. And working them until completely dissolved. You most likely will have 3 to 4 additions of these pastels at 5 each time. The main thing to remember is that we never add any pastels after we have reached or gone past 35 degrees, because it is guaranteed that these will not melt in the mixture. So then I would have chunks. The reason I don't like chopping my pastels is that I like, in case I did add too many and they don't melt, I can use a dipping fork or a fork and just rake through my chocolate and remove the lumps. So the idea is don't be worried about being too heavy-handed with your seeds, because you can fish them out, but I like additions of 5. So you can see that that took no time for those 5 to completely dissolve and melt. I'm going to take my temperature and see how much that has reduced my heat. So that's gone down to 42.8. So 5 pastels have knocked 10 degrees out. I of course have a lot coming out because of my cold rag as well. Now that they are gone and I'm still above 35 degrees Celsius, I'm adding another 5. Start working that. Remember, we don't want bubbles because bubbles will actually cause temperature differences within the mixture. So if I do notice I have some bubbles, I can tap my bowl so they come up to the surface. Once you start doing the seeding method, there is no stopping this motion. As soon as I stop mixing, I will cause certain areas to have larger crystals, and then I will get streaks in my chocolate. I also kind of sway side to side sometimes, and it just sort of slows me down. This is a very soothing, slow process. You don't want to be going at this with anger or any kind of agitation. I sort of call it swaying, as if you're dancing to a very, very slow song. So I keep going. I want to make sure I'm bringing the outsides to the insides so that the whole mass is doing the same thing. And you will notice, especially using Lindt Surfin, that you will see a little bit of a white streak developing on top as you're doing this. I don't want you to worry about that too much because what that actually is the vanillin, which is the vanilla extract, which is a fake vanilla extract. Okay, so we're still coming down our seed chart here. We're dropping down. Now our window is 27 degrees Celsius to 28 degrees Celsius, which means our exact temperature we're looking for is 27.5. Now I've seen all my chocolate pastels melt, so I'm going to again take my temperature. There is not a moment where you can never take the temperature too much, so just keep it there if you need to. And that only came down to 40, so I really am slowing down the cooling process now. Because I'm still above 35, I'm going to add more pastels. Now, if after I reach 27 degrees Celsius and I don't agitate it, it'll turn right into solid chocolate. So it is in temper at 27.5 degrees. But it is also at its lowest temperature in the temper window. So I need to warm it up to dissolve some of the crystals to get fluidity. So the reason for this is because we are using couverture chocolate. Now couverture chocolate is designed to be more fluid because it contains more cocoa butter than baking chocolate. Because of this, I have the possibility for as many beta crystals as all that cocoa butter can hold on to. But the downside of it is because cocoa butter can be really, really strong, it can be too thick for me to work with. So I need to melt it, but in a controlled way that I do not melt the remaining beta crystals. So when I warm it up, it is very, very, very important that we do not go over this mark. If I go over 32 degrees Celsius, that means I'm erasing the beta crystals that I'm working so hard to make right now, and then I have to start all over again. If you miss this window and go too low, you will have thick, chunky chocolate to work with, so you start over again. As long as I have a good amount of beta crystals for my seeds, I'm okay. I can melt and redo as many times as I need. But you do not want to go over this highest temperature in its final work window. You can see over here what I've done is I've taken the lowest possible temperature before it starts to set, given to me by my supplier is 27 degrees Celsius, and the highest temperature before I fall out of temper or melt my beta crystals is 32 degrees given by my warm work window. So that gives me what is a comfortable window to keep my chocolate at while I am dipping and manipulating it. But because I find 32 is too close to the danger zone and 27 is too close to a workability danger zone, I want to stay away from them. So I convert my work window given to me by my company with a little bit of wiggle room. So my work window is 28 degrees Celsius and 31 degrees Celsius so that I still have 1 degree of wiggle room in case something happens, I walk away. So those guys are gone. Let's have a look. We're at 37. So about the times you get to the 30s is when you want to start using additional sources of cold. So I still have 2 degrees to melt, so I can add maybe 2 or 3 pastels. I don't want to add too many at this point because I'm very close to the 35 window. That 35 window will prevent any additional pastels from melting. So those are my last ones that I'm adding. I always remove a little bit extra in case I have to start over and melt it down again. So I had about 75 grams removed. And you can see my pattern. I just turn. If you develop this pattern, you will have the most unbelievable temper every single time, and eventually you won't even need to think about it. The good thing about Lindt chocolate is I find it does tell you when it's getting physically closer visually. I will start to see a ring developing around the bowl that I can't wipe off with my spatula. Now this is going to take some time, so I'm just going to whip into a time lapse now, but this will take, at home, depending on your conditions, 10 to 15 minutes of stirring. So I like to walk around with my bowl, but you never, ever, ever stop. Okay, so welcome back. I just didn't need you to sit there watching me stir for the whole time, but that is going to take you about 7 to 10 minutes depending on your environment. You can see I'm a little bit thicker. So I can see a little bit of a ribbon left behind when I do that. Another thing I'm looking at is the edge of the bowl. I tend to get this ring around the bowl that I can't get rid of, especially with Lindt chocolate. You're going to see that with every chocolate that you use, this viscosity and these cues are going to change. So it's good to pick one type and stick with it. Just make sure that it is a couverture chocolate that we can temper well, so has extra cocoa butter in it. So I'm at 27, just over 27, so 27.7 here. So I want to go down to 27.5. I'm still keeping it on my cool rag. The last couple degrees are going to feel excruciating. If you need to, turn up some music. Get yourself a glass of wine, like I said, whatever can make you a bit more patient. This is what you need. I like to listen to podcasts when I do this. Okay, so now that I'm getting really close to the temperature, I'm going to draw a test line on my fork or my knife. Now I have one at the original melt temperature, and I have one halfway through my seeding process. And now this one is getting closer to the temper. Now it is hard to see, but you can see that some of them are just physically higher than the other ones. So the closer I get to temper, the thicker my chocolate's going to be. So you can see that they're going to stand up a bit. Now, if you are in proper temper, it will set within 3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5. I say wait 5 to 7 if you need to. The idea is that is how you test if you're in temper. Once you've reached all your temperatures, I still have to go through my warm window. I'm going to draw a line on my metal surface, or people do it on parchment paper. Wait 3 to 5 minutes until it sets. And then you can tell by how it looks. Okay, we're going to give it one more final test. 27.6, so that's good enough for me to start my 10-minute count. I'm going to bring the outside to the inside, and that should bring it down that extra 1 degree. You can see how I'm still doing that motion. Okay, so I'm going to start my counting now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I started my count when it was 27.6, bouncing between 27.6 and 27.5. I finished my count when it's bouncing between 27.5 and 27.4. So that's perfect. I know that I hit that window for 10 seconds. Now we reheat. This is a major mess up zone. My water is just simmering to the point that I have moisture on my hands. but there is no action happening. When I put it on the heat, I take from the bottom up. You can count to 10 if you want to. The idea is you do not want to overheat this, because if I overheat it, I have to start all the way from the beginning again. So I'm at 29 already. That was really, really fast. So you take your bottom to the top, no more than 10 seconds on that heat. It doesn't even feel like a lot of heat. Moving the outside to the inside, moving the whole mass around. I'm looking for 31.5. So now I'm at 28.5. Back on the heat. No more than 10 seconds. You don't want to go through that whole cooling process just to melt your beta crystals away. You worked hard for them. They're happy. So I'm at 30, 29.5, bouncing in the 30s. So again, take it off the heat. Bottom to the top, sides down. You have to consider the entire mass of chocolate, not just the surface. So I'm 29.9 and I'm going to 31.5. So this is my third reheat. Now it is important to keep this pot here of this hot water beside your chocolate. So whenever you go down towards that 27 mark, you definitely need to reheat. So I'm 31.3. That's plenty for me. What I'm going to do now is get a dry towel, one that does not have any moisture on it, and I can put my chocolate on that to incubate it. I've also seen the use of heating pads here, because at their lowest setting, they're going to be about the 31 work window. I like to bring all my chocolate to the center of the bowl so it can keep itself nice and warm. You want to take its temperature every 5 to 10 minutes so that it does not fall out of your work window. Remember, your work window is 28 degrees to 31 degrees. So if I see it's going down towards 28, I want to stop what I'm doing, reheat it. You can see that my last addition, I just put it, is a lot taller than the ones beside it. In 3 to 5 minutes, this should be set, hard, shiny, smooth, with no streaks, no cloudiness, and you will notice that the first one I put down will never set. They don't set because they're not in temper. And that is how you temper chocolate. I wish you the best of luck. I wish you patience, and just remember, if you mess up, all it means is melt it down again in the work window and start over. I hope you enjoy your tempering process.